Okay. Good evening, coaches. Welcome back. It's week 11. We're thrilled tonight to have with us all the way from Calgary and Hockey Canada, Mr. Corey McNabb. Corey is the Director of Hockey Development Programs. So for all the coaches on the call, you should all be familiar with the instructional stream, Development 1, Coach 2, High Performance 1 clinics. All of that training and coach certification falls under Corey's mandate at National Headquarters of Hockey Canada. So with no further ado, Corey, thrilled to have you with us tonight. I'm going to turn it over to you, sir. Welcome.
All right. Thanks, Brian and Jeff and Hockey Eastern Ontario. Appreciate the invite. I know for most of us, we've gone through a lot of different online coaching seminars and what have you over the last number of months. And I think, as you've probably heard us chatting a little bit, we're getting closer to the opening up of seeing some sense of normalcy when it comes to hockey. But I still think this is a great opportunity to share information and to learn and to ask questions. And one of the things that I've enjoyed about this is just the variety of coaching presentations I've been able to see during COVID-19 and sort of the atmosphere that we're dealing with now. Obviously I think in person is better, but this is the second best thing where we can have coaches from across the country able to join. And I know from a volume standpoint, I've been able to watch a lot more of them than I would have had we been, dealing with having to travel and so forth. So I think this is going to be a little bit of a new normal as far as offering coaching development sessions, not only in the off season, but throughout the season for coaches to participate in. So I'm going to take you through a bit of a presentation on some long-term player development, a few of the philosophies that we're sort of highlighting from a national office standpoint right now. And then I'm going to get into a little bit more of a hockey-specific side of things from sort of how we're looking at developing players and some things that we think will help coaches along the way. So any questions, obviously put them in the chat forum, and Brian or Jeff will be able to facilitate that as we go through the presentation. So for us at Hockey Canada, our goal is not to put players in the NHL, but it's rather to ensure a meaningful and enjoyable experience. And for me, the number one thing that I look at from success from a coaching standpoint is, are the kids having fun? Is it a great experience? And are they coming back to play the game next year? And I think as a coach, the last thing that you want to do is be a child's last coach. And so it doesn't necessarily mean that they're all going on to AAA and junior and so forth, but it's making sure that these boys and girls are playing hockey again next year and enjoying the experience of it. It's not to say we don't want as many of the young boys and girls to get to the NHL or the women's Olympic team. We definitely want to do that, but we think if we go about it the right way, they're going to have a better chance. And that's one of the key messaging to coaches and parents and associations out there is if we do a good job in development and we keep these young boys and girls involved in the game and enjoying the experience, that we're going to have a lot of them that are going to go on to higher levels. But more importantly, that they stay in the game and eventually they'll come back and play recreational hockey. They'll be coaches themselves, they'll be officials, they'll be administrators and everything like that, that are a huge component of the success of the game in Canada. So some of the things we want to cover off initially is from a long-term player development standpoint is some things when we're looking at developing players in our system that I think we can do a better job at, and maybe we need to do a little bit more focus on. So one, seasonal structure, skills versus team play, practice versus games. At the younger levels, for some of you coaches that are at the U9, half-ice games, the cross-ice games versus the full-ice games, competition, and then multi-sport participation. And these are all components of long-term player development that are really, really important to touch on. So to me, from a minor hockey association or club, whatever your situation is, there's two main things that I think are really, really important. And number one is consistency in the coaching philosophy. It's important for an association or a club to get the coaches on the same page. And that doesn't mean that coaches are being told what to do every step of the way. I believe the coaches should be involved in developing that philosophy. But the main thing that we want to make sure that we're covering there is that coaches are on the same page. So we don't have one set of coaches doing something over here, another set of coaches doing something totally opposite. Because at the end of the day, the kids end up being intermixed on different teams as they go through their hockey pathway. And a lot of times as coaches, we feel like we're starting over from the beginning of the season. And I know a lot of times in clinics, I'll ask coaches, put up your hand if you have gone through the first 2 or 3 practices of the season, and you say to yourself, I can't believe what these kids don't know, or I can't believe what these kids don't or can't do. And so I think it's important to have consistent philosophy in what your coaches are trying to teach, whether it's keeping kids active, whether it's the type and the formatting of your practice to make sure that coaches are doing some consistent drills. And I always encourage associations to get coaches on board with developing a set of drills that they can all do, whether you're a U9 player or a U15 player or a U13 player in the middle. It's doing drills where you're going to be teaching the fundamentals. And so much like we have in the school system where kids flow through from grade 3 to grade 4 to grade 5 to grade 6, there's a curriculum there. And what we want coaches and associations to be able to do is develop some consistency. And so that's the second part, is consistency in what coaches are teaching. It's difficult when you have one group of coaches who's working on breakouts and systems and forechecks, and the other one's totally dealing with skill development. So at the end of the day, we want to try and make sure we have consistency in what they're teaching, consistency in the messaging, consistency in how they're teaching, how they're running practices. What it's going to do is actually build your association and make it much stronger down the road. So from an association standpoint, I think there's 3 things that are imperative when it comes to sort of an underlying philosophy. Number 1, the kids have to enjoy coming to the rink every day. For some of these kids, the practice or the game that night might be the best thing that happens to them all day. It might be the best thing that happens to them all week or even all month. So that has to be imperative. Number 2 is the improvement of the player's skills. When players get better at something, they're continually going to want to keep coming back. They're going to have smiles on their faces, and essentially they want to see themselves better. So if you look at an analogy like video games, which obviously a lot of kids have been pretty heavily involved in over the COVID-19 scenario, but the challenge is that they continually want to get to the next level, or they want to beat their score. And I think if we take some of the things that video games or other activities are being applied at in as far as kids go, and what's the hook, what keeps them coming back, is they continually want to get better. And so I think that's a huge important philosophical point to make. And then number 3 is when we say developing a players to play at the next level. Like I said, it's not necessarily about getting kids to AAA or junior. It's making sure that they're playing from U9 to U11, from U11 to U13. When that happens, we're going to keep that foundation of kids who start the game. We're going to keep them in the game. And that's a big focus of Hockey Canada right now, is not only in the recruitment, but also in the retention of players. So ultimately, if I was to break long-term player development down into one sentence, I would say it's keeping as many kids as possible, playing at as high a level as possible for as long as possible. We have a structure in our game which I feel really is based upon cutting kids way too early. We don't keep enough kids around long enough to really see what they can do, and that's an important component. I know, a lot of times at younger levels, we seem to be in a rush to get to best on best. But the reality of it is, through sports studies in Canada, amongst different sports, amongst studies done in different countries around the world, and again in different sports, there is not a lot of high amount of predictability when it comes to looking at a player who's 10 years old, or 12 years old, or even 14 years old, as to where they're actually going to end up. And so our job should be to keep as many of these kids playing at as high a level as possible. If you look at the NHL this last season, there was 145 players who played at least one game in the NHL that were not drafted. So that means 145 players weren't deemed good enough to be selected by an NHL team in their draft year, but they've continued to develop and make it further on. And 2 years ago, it was 171 players. So there's a lot of players at the highest level in the world that weren't deemed good enough, or weren't deemed enough of a prospect to be selected, but they've continued to develop and progress and be chosen that way. And one of the fears that I have at the younger levels is, the young boy or girl who gets cut at 12 or gets cut at 14 or even gets cut at 16, we don't really know if they would have turned out to be a potentially really high-performing player. And I see that a lot across the country. So we should be trying to keep those kids in the game as long as possible. The second thing here is by implementing a standardized technical curriculum, which leads back to the first 2 points we talked about. I think you're really going to build a foundation where athletes are going to enjoy the game and reach their potential. And that's really what we want to try and do, is maximize the potential of young boys and girls and making sure that if they want it, if they want to put in the time, if they want to put in the effort, that we're rewarding them by keeping them in the game and giving them a place to play. And again, I know a lot of times we want to get the best on best early on, but the studies will show that that's not necessarily the best way of developing players. So, I know it's fun to win. It's usually more fun to win than it is to lose. But at the end of the day, the development component should not be compromised. And that means, we're continually trying to develop, refine the technical skills of the game so that they're better skaters, better puck handlers. And at the end of the day, I think the bonus of that is going to be the fact that they're also going to develop better hockey sense. And, from coast to coast, we see a lot of teams at the young levels that are working on their breakouts and they're working on their forechecks, but they're not really developing the skills within those types of concepts so that players, when they get to a certain point, they're going to be able to have the fundamental skills necessary to play any system that any coach wants to play. So it's very important that we don't compromise that development aspect of young boys and girls. For us, all players, and including players on the pathway to high performance, need to continually perfect these skills. So from a Hockey Canada level, our first stage of high performance is the under 17 level, where we're bringing in the top 110, 112 skaters and the top 12 goalies. And that's truly where we look at it as high performance starts. That doesn't mean there's not good players that are 10, that are 12, that are 14. That's just the first stage for us. And the reality of it is we look at all the players before that as players on the pathway to high performance. They have a potential. There's an opportunity for them to grow and advance, and everyone does it at different stages and at different rates. But we want to look at all those players as saying, if you want to go that path and try to make it to as high a level as possible, you are on the pathway to high performance. And essentially, when we look at it from advancing the skills and the tactics, it's really going to be something that's going to contribute significantly to team success, both in practice and in games. And one of the things that I look at from a success in practice standpoint is, I know typically success is measured by wins and losses or goal differentials or different things like that. But in the whole continuum of development, I really believe that the better job coaches do in practice, the better that drills and skills are executed in practice is going to ultimately lead to success in games. And we see, again, ice sessions all over the country where, we have 2 kids moving, 14 kids standing still, where we see coaches working on systems and structure. And at the same time, there's kids that are going offside in drills. They're not completing passes. They're not executing pass reception and those types of things. So I really looked at it as success in practice is ultimately what's going to give teams and players and coaches successes in the games. And so at the end of the day, we really want to try and focus on efficient practicing to maximize that development of the players. Next stage, which is obviously one it's a huge amount of stress for coaches, for players, for parents at the start of the year, and really it comes down to player evaluation. And I think our system right now is a little bit too much geared towards selecting the best player today. We could probably put 20 players on the ice this evening, and all of us coaches could go out there, and we could probably pick the 15 best players as of today. But we don't really know who the best players are going to be a year from now, 3 years from now, 5 years from now. And so a lot of times our player evaluation process is really based on player selection and not talent identification. And talent identification is obviously more difficult, but it's really trying to look at these players at younger levels and looking at where their potential is and who could be the best players as they go through the system. And I think if we look at whether it's the NHL, Major Junior, Tier 2 Junior, Midget AAA, Bantam AAA, any of the levels, again, we often select the players who are the best today, but are they going to be the best 3 months from now or a year from now? And again, when we just look at the stats of players at the NHL level who weren't drafted but end up making it, I think we really need to try and take a different approach in some cases as to how we identify players. And just from a coaching standpoint, I really believe it's your job. If you pick him or you pick her, then you got to play him. It's a coach's job to develop every player to contribute to the team. Does that mean, again, depending on the level that you're at, that everyone's going to be on a first line power play or first line PK or always out there in the last minute? Not necessarily, but we need to give them the opportunity to get there. We need to provide the opportunities. And I think, it's a tough job sometimes with coaches when you can be feeling the pressure a little bit to try and win games and things like that. But at the end of the day, if you really want to look at it, the job is to try and develop every player to contribute to the team, and so that's a huge component. To me, all the players deserve the same opportunities. You don't really know who's going to flourish and become a great player, but the more times that we limit opportunities along that whole pathway, the lesser chance that someone's going to get there. And we've had a lot of coaches talk to us about the fact that maybe early on in their coaching or along their pathway, they felt it was important to roll the top kids, to only give the best kids the opportunity and things like that. And so I think it's important from a coaching philosophy standpoint to really try and treat all your kids the same. Now, bad penalties or behavior problems aside, other than that, I think where sometimes ice time is one of the only ways you're going to be able to hold players accountable. It should really be about trying to give them all the same opportunities and the opportunities to play. John Herdman, who was the coach of the women's national soccer team and is now with the men's team, really said, if you want more quality cream, you need more quality cows. So what we need to do, if you want to have a better team, you need to develop all your players. You're really only as good as your least skilled players and your depth. And so your job as a coach should be to develop everybody into situations where they can all contribute. And one of the quotes that he also had was, a lot of times people never want to be part of the process, but they want to be part of the outcome. But it's really that process is where you figure out who's worth being part of the outcome. And I think that's an important quote, because at the end of the day, that's what we want. We want to make sure that there's a process in place, that everyone is buying into the process along the way. And ultimately, you will be part of the outcome and not taking any shortcuts. Seasonal structure. I think this is an important one, and we're going through a lot of sort of changes from Hockey Canada and a lot of our member branches at this point, is looking at the seasonal structure and trying to adapt it in a way that's going to be more conducive to player development. In a lot of cases in this country right now, kids come into tryouts or evaluations, selections, whatever terminology is that you want to use it for the start of the season, and they get 3 or 4 skates, boom, you're picked on a team. Next thing you know, your league starts and it's game, practice, game, practice, game, practice. Do we really look at our seasonal schedule and say, is this really conducive to development? Is this giving the coach enough time to work on the foot speed of their defensemen or to work on the creativity of their forwards? And in a lot of cases, I think we can say no. We're stuck into a bit of a games model that sometimes overrides the development. So some of the things that we're looking at our seasonal structure is right from the tryout or evaluation phase at the start of the season is to make it more conducive to developing of players. We all see the kids who go to 5 or 6 hockey schools leading up to tryouts, and they look great, but by the time November or December comes around, they flatline. We see the other kids who are playing different sports, multi-sport athletes, who maybe only got a chance to get on the ice 1 or 2 times or 3 times maybe, and maybe they don't show as well in evaluations, but the potential for them to improve more and over a longer period of time is there. So we've made some recommendations at the different age groups where the child's first experience with hockey, typically in September in most places around the country, is right after Labor Day, and that shouldn't be your first experience in hockey as a tryout, where you get a penny on your to put on, and it's number 10 white, and it's basically don't screw up so you get cut. That's not conducive to anybody, is putting them into that situation, your first experience in hockey. So we're really looking at providing an opportunity where kids can get back on the ice through their association, get 2 or 3 or 4 skates, 5 skates, whatever it's going to be, before the formal evaluation starts. The second part is that the formal evaluation is, again, I believe kids need to have an opportunity to show what they can do. And it shouldn't be just coming out to one session and then they're getting cut. Now, I understand there's logistics in different parts of the country that some of those things may need to be worked to, but the ultimate philosophy of it is, let's ease kids into a little bit. The first week of school is stressful enough for everybody, for coaches, for parents, for associations, and for kids. Why would we add further stress on that where now all of a sudden you have hockey tryouts in there? The second component that we look at as sort of a development phase is providing a period of time where coaches can really have a chance to practice with their team before they start playing formal games. And that's not to say you can't have early bird tournament or you can't have a couple exhibitions and exhibition games in there, but really it should be more about providing kids with enough practice time to develop. So you can actually work on some of those skills where they're lacking, whether it's pass reception or, again, the foot speed of your defenseman. Because in our current system right now, a lot of times we jump into games too quick. And the reality as a coach is as much as you might have the philosophy of developing skills, you just don't have enough time. And as we go through the season, basically we see in a lot of places, again, in the country where the regular season is done so early. And a lot of times it's in January or February because we have a playoff system that is rounds after round after round, copying like we see at junior hockey or the NHL. And again, every time you have a playoff round, 50% of the teams are eliminated. So we see a lot of kids, and a lot of kids even at competitive, your AA, AAA levels, whose season is over by February 10th. Their team happens to lose out in the current playoff structure, they're done. So we have some other kids that their season is actually almost 6 weeks or 2 months longer. And so when we're really trying to provide opportunities to develop everybody, we're looking at why would we continue to go down a path of round after round of playoffs when we can actually provide an opportunity for all the teams and all the kids to play longer into the season, where it should be a higher level of intensity and a higher level of competition. And we're actually equaling the playing field. There's good players on weaker teams who, over the course of 2 or 3 years, they might play 6 months of less hockey than somebody else. So when we just look at the big picture of it, it's about trying to make sure that our season from a game standpoint starts a little later and ends a little later so that everyone is playing to the end of the season. The other thing that's going to do is really incorporate more rest, more recovery into the season, gives more kids a chance to possibly participate in some other sports throughout the school year, which right now in some cases is very difficult, and continue to develop athletes. So, again, depending on the age level that you may be coaching, there's some different seasonal structures and calendars that are being put together to provide a guideline as far as giving more kids a chance to play. A couple of key things that we talked about is, I think, again, hockey school before tryouts. Why not give the kids a chance to, get back on the ice and get accustomed to new gear and maybe get back into the swing of things before we really start to evaluate. I think as I mentioned, it's a stressful time of year, but also give kids a chance to go out there and not worry about making a mistake their first time back on the ice. So let's get them back into the swing of things. Second thing that I think is important when we look from an athlete development standpoint is right now, and especially with older age groups, your U15s or U18s, I see a lot of them right now, they do their token 1 dry land a week. And they look at that as saying, that's our off-ice development. But in reality, if we were to look at an analogy from a societal standpoint, January 1, there's a lot of people out there who make that commitment, that New Year's resolution, I'm going to go to the gym. Well, if you only went to the gym every Wednesday in January, which is only 4 times, you're not going to see any improvement. But our current system is right now is really, especially at more competitive levels where you're practicing, you're playing, you do your 1 token dry land a week. And really, what are we getting out of that? Probably not a lot. So we're really trying to promote the fact that if you can do a 20-minute athletic warm-up before practice and a 20-minute cool down, you're actually getting a lot more activity out of these players. We know they don't get the same number or amount of activity in the school system anymore, but you could actually have your second day could be a day off. So you're providing rest and recovery. And we see this in multiple sports, especially in other countries where they might say, we have 12 training sessions a week. And people say 12 training sessions a week. Well, that's impossible. But when you look at it and say, we're going to do a 20-minute athletic warm-up before practice, then we're going to go on the ice, practice for an hour, 50 minutes, whatever it's going to be. Then we do another 20-minute athletic cool down after each practice and game. We're actually getting a lot more activity out of these kids. It's less time consuming, and we're going to see far better gains. And so looking at some concepts like that as far as developing players, I think is huge. A lot of teams will do their token warm up before a game. They put the tracksuits on, they run around the parking lot and try to avoid vehicles and buses and what have you, but very few are doing anything before practice. And so I think it's an important thing to look at as far as further developing athletic skills. A lot of times we're asking these players to be at the rink early, but what are they doing there for 45 minutes or an hour before? A lot of times they're not doing anything. And so let's look at some ways that we can incorporate some of these things into our player development. And essentially, I think a lot of times you'll be able to eliminate day specifically outlined for dry land training. And I think, again, you're going to be able to provide more rest and recovery for your players. Talked a little bit about the playoffs. One of the challenges in our system with playoff rounds, where sometimes teams make playoffs and other teams don't, is once you get to Christmas time, a lot of times now it's a rush where players and coaches are scrambling to get teams in playoffs. So skill development kind of goes out the window. It's all about team systems and our power play and our breakout and things like that. So the development window in that scenario is actually quite short. So by extending the season, making it a situation where everybody can get into the playoffs, we're actually stretching out the season to provide more time to develop and again for that rest and recovery. And again, I think the competition intensity at the end of the year is when it should be at its highest, and we want to give every player a chance to participate in that scenario. So for us, really at the under 13 level, it should really all about developing technical skills, refining technical skills, and making sure that players are developing the entire skill set, whether it's skating, whether it's puck handling, whether it's passing or shooting, so that, again, later on, they will be able to fit into any system that a coach wants. And, again, being in the rinks all the time throughout the winter, I see a ton of coaches that are working on their breakout 40 times, 40 practices in a row they work on their breakout. But they don't actually break it down and work on the components, the skill and the tactics side, so that they could actually spend less time working on the breakout and working more on executing those types of things. So the other thing when we see coaches rushing into team play or team tactics, a lot of times it takes away creativity from players because they're always being told what to do. You stand here, you pass here, then you pass it to this person. And I think it really limits or reduces the ability of players to reach their potential as far as becoming dangerous offensive players and players who are difference makers on the ice. So to me, a lot of times the more advanced a team is, the more a coach will work on structure. But in reality, it should still be the same philosophy of working on whether it's saucer passes or creative scoring moves, deceptive puck control, agility, all those types of things. That's really what's going to advance players beyond the level where they're at and onto the elite levels of hockey. When you get to the major junior level or the NHL level or the women's national team level, everybody can skate, everybody can handle the puck, everybody can pass. And again, they're still always trying to improve that, but it's important to make sure that we give kids opportunities to excel, and we're not holding them back by giving them all the tools in the toolbox and things like that so the coaches can go forward. Now, having said that, there's also an element of coaching where we're trying to teach responsible skill. So kids understand when, why, and how. So they learn a move like a toe drag, for example. And once they first learn it, we all see them. They want to try and do it 16 times up the ice, and they got to beat the other team, each of the players 2 or 3 times. But from a coaching standpoint, we want to give them the tools. And then the art of coaching is to teach them the how and the when and the why, so that they're not turning pucks over at the offensive blue line or their own defensive blue line. But we've all, as a coach, have said it behind the bench at some point. We need someone to make a play. We need somebody to make things happen. If we don't continually develop those things in practice, we're not going to see those things happen in a game. Competition, we believe competition is important in all aspects of life. It's a fact of life. It's something that we're all going to face. So we're not trying to remove competition or say that competition is not important, because competition is healthy. When we look at other countries around the world and even still, a lot of times they'll ask us, what do you guys do to make those Canadian kids so competitive? Well, there's advantages to playing games when they're at a young level. They learn how to win the race for the puck. They learn how to want to score goals, and they learn to want to win. And those things they're all inherently important in developing hockey players down the road. But there needs to be a balance. There needs to be that balance between developing the skills and then utilizing the game for a coach to understand and evaluate where those players are at. And, again, by doing good things in practice and in developing skills and habits, especially developing good habits, once a coach starts to see those things being executed in a game, now I think you can see that you're on the right path. And we're going to talk a little bit about some of that later in the presentation. We get into more sort of the hockey specific on ice type of stuff, but it's hugely important that we allow kids to practice and we allow kids to compete, and the balance between the two is really, really important. A lot of times we get too caught up in the structure of games, and we don't have enough free play. We don't give kids the opportunity to necessarily maybe scrimmage in practice and just sit back and watch and see what they're doing and get a sense of what their thought process is. and trying to let them learn without putting pressure on them. We use the example, there's thousands of kids playing hide and go seek every day where there's no referee stats and records of wins and losses, and there's definitely no national championship. But, we tend to get caught up in some of those things too early. And I think it's important for us to recognize that kids are going to develop at their own pace. Some of them are really going to be that game player that maybe doesn't look as good in practice, but they're really gamers. They show up there, and vice versa. We're going to see other kids that maybe they're excellent practice players, but they just haven't been able to take that transition into games. And so I think as from a coaching standpoint, we need to develop different little forms of competition, whether it's small area games in practice, whether it's relays, whether it's small area skills or small area battle type scenarios. Those are all things that are going to contribute to a player developing, and it doesn't just have to be that formal game of 5-on-5. And I really believe we're going to see some big results coming out of the under 7, under 9, where we've taken the game to half ice and cross ice hockey, where we just look at the stats on the amount of times that kids touch the puck, the amount of shots on net, the amount of passes taken, the amount of passes received. Those are all things that are going to over time are going to have a huge impact on our game. And again, really looking at developing the skills in a small area, which is really going to help them when they get older. We've all run tons of flow drills where we see players going up and down the ice from end to end. They look really good. But at the end of the game, at the end of the day, is that really what the game is all about? We've looked again at stats at an NHL level, at our World Junior level, where we'll actually time the amount of time that the puck spends in the neutral zone and the defensive zone and the offensive zone. And the average is out of a 60-minute hockey game, the puck is only in the neutral zone for about 8 to 10 minutes. That means for the other 50 minutes, the puck is either in your end defensively or in the other end offensively. So when we look at how the game is played and where the actual puck time is spent, we probably should be spending a lot more time on small area skills and the small area game side of things, because the majority of the games that kids play, you have 10 kids inside the blue line, either offensively or defensively. And what are the small area skating skills they need, the small area puck skills, the read and react type of skills, and those types of things. So when we really look at how the game should be introduced to young boys and girls and the progression along the way, I think some of those changes that we've made are going to make a big deal. From a player development standpoint, again, we want to really put the development process at the forefront and refusing to compromise on the importance of this, the standardized curriculum, and then really building that foundation for players to enjoy hockey and reach their potential is important. So from a coaching standpoint, it really comes down to identifying the specific skills needed to develop players at their different levels and introducing age-appropriate specific skills. So the skating before the puck control, before the passing, before the shooting, and making sure that we have that progression of A before B, before C, before D. And then trying to figure out and understand how's the best way to develop these in players, implementing skill development that's specific in the drills and in the practices, so that if we say we want to develop the foot speed of our defensemen, are we evaluating our drills in practice and say, yes, this is actually going to develop foot speed? The whole practice plan as a whole, this series of practice plans, whether it's 2 or 3 practice plans in a row or 5 or 10, are we really evaluating our practices to see that the things we want to see enhanced are really being developed? And then ultimately, to me, I think it comes down to a productive yearly development plan. And that doesn't mean you need to have every drill, every practice, every week, every month totally planned out, but you should have some sort of a plan that you want to follow. And that doesn't mean that you can't adapt it or change it along the way, but to have a plan so you can understand where are we at, can we progress, can we regress, can we speed things up, do we have to slow things down? It's going to give you a sense of where your players are at. So I think sometimes it's not as hard as it might look, or it's not as hard as it appears, but in a lot of cases it does take some courage and commitment to have that development plan, to focus on skill improvement. What are the drills that we need to do, even if they're the most basic drills in the world, but that's really going to get boys and girls to the point where they can actually execute at a pace and a speed that they can have success, and then transfer it. Observation, sometimes it's good to have other people observing, whether it's games or practices. Sometimes as a coach, we get so wound up in running the drills that and the timing and worried about where players are that we sometimes miss some of that observation. So if there's an opportunity to have other people assist, or essentially assigning assistant coaches to that. The sequencing and progressions, making sure we're putting the skills in the right order, and then the teaching progressions as well. So it's not just the skills in the right order, but are we teaching the tactics before the team play? And a lot of times, as a coach, you'll have parents say, "Oh, we need to work on our breakout more." Well, maybe we do need to work on our breakout, but more importantly, we need to work on the skills required in order for a breakout to happen, and then the tactical component, so kids understand what to do in this certain situation, so they can actually get the puck out of their own zone. So it's not only just the sequencing and progression of skills, but also the teaching progressions. So from a standpoint there, it's really about coaches being able to understand that where the players are in their skill development, where do they need to get to. So if you're working with a U11, you're with U13 or U15 player, where are they at now, but where do they need to get to advance and get to higher levels? What is that skill development required? Is it going back to basics and working on fundamentals? How does that tie into the tactical development? We see a lot of kids right now that there's all kinds of stuff on the ice. There's obstacles everywhere, and they're stick handling all over the place. But really, is there a purpose to it? Is that a game-like situation? Is that drill done on the area of ice where it would typically happen in a game? So understanding that the skill development, yes, is important, but there's also the tactical component, so they can turn all those fine motor skills into something that can happen in a game. And in reality, I see a lot of skill programs out there right now where it's all about kids, putting together a great video that's on YouTube or Instagram, but can they really play? And so from a coach, again, it comes back to that responsible skill of giving the kids the tools, but then teaching them the why and the how and the when. Understanding how to instruct. What are the things that we need to do? Are we trying to give them 27 points to remember in a practice, or are we just really focusing on three key things that the players need? What is the teaching process? Is it repetition, repetition, repetition? Is it introducing a skill, developing the skill, refining a skill, and maybe we have to step back and do further development before we refine it? So it's taking a look at all these different things. And then to me, skill development is really coming down to skills that are game applicable. Again, for the most part, everything that we do from a Hockey Canada side, we're looking at putting together drills and skills that happen in a game. So we have a Hockey Canada Network app that has tons of drills and video on there, and what we try to do with every single one is throw in a Team Canada game clip, so that now coaches and players can understand why we're working on this specific skill or why we're working on this specific drill. And we can show them a clip of a game to say, this is where it happens in a game. I think it's going to increase that buy-in. So it's important for a coach to understand all of the different components. There's lots of good drills out there. There's lots of people that run good drills. But to me, the drills are only effective if they're executed properly. Instructors need to execute the drill. They need to observe their players and correct their technique. Obviously, repetition is important, but I don't believe we need to be telling kids what to do every 5 seconds in a drill. I think the philosophy of introducing them to the drill, giving them a demonstration if required, letting them go through it a few times to sort of figure things out, and then if you're continually seeing mistakes, obviously you have to stop it or pull a player aside and give them some pointers. But I go to a skateboarding analogy, and if we go down to a local skateboard park and see all these kids out there on their skateboards, there's no one standing there with a whistle and a clipboard and stopping everything. They learn by doing. They observe the kid who can do the best tricks, and they try and copy it. They emulate it. They figure a lot of the stuff out. So, I think in drills we need to take some of those things into account. And again, obviously repetition. You're not going to improve foot speed in one drill in 1 week, maybe not even in a month. And that doesn't mean you have to do the same drill over and over and over, but we do need to be working on similar skills, sometimes in different drills, to continually give players the opportunity to work on some of those aspects. Reality of it is you're not going to play in the orchestra until you learn how to play an instrument first. There's the scales and there's the notes, and you have to learn all those things before you can actually play a song, and then before you can actually get into a group of people to play in an orchestra. So a lot of times the same philosophies that apply in other areas are just as important here. Mastering individual skills before trying to master tactics. So for example, we recommend that kids don't become a left defenseman when they're 10 or 11 years old. There's a lot of skills that need to apply. So let's not put those kids into situations where you're only a left defenseman or a right winger. Let's give them the opportunity to learn all of the skills, and then once they get into that, maybe the later parts of U11 or U13 where they're going to start to navigate towards a position maybe they like a little bit better. But let's teach all the kids the skating skills, the puck skills, the passing skills that forwards and defensemen require, so that we're giving more kids, again, a wider skill base to develop from. But again, all those things take time, and it's important for a coach to have the plan, and so that they're organized as to how and when they're going to do these types of things. So if we look at teaching progressions, we'll go through two of these here, and we'll have some video clips to show it as well. But the teaching process that I think is fairly simple for a coach to be able to follow is number one, yes, there's technique involved. Number two is the practice component or the repetition. Number three is an element of a drill where there's a figure it out aspect for kids, where we're not telling them what to do. We have to ask them to figure it out. The fourth progression would be getting to a point where we're working on that skill or that drill with purpose and with speed. So we're doing that drill on the area of ice that it would actually happen in a game. We're trying to get to a point where they're doing it with speed, so that it happens at game speed. And then the last point is going to be the game application. So I'll go through a little bit that in more detail a little bit later on, and same with the 5 points on the right-hand side. So if we look at a skill, for example, like puck protection, it's great if players can get the puck, but how often do they get it and they lose it right away? So to me, I think these two concepts are something that you could implement into almost any skill that you're teaching, and figure out sort of 5 points or 3 points or 2 points, whatever the number of points are that you can also share with the players. So if we look at puck protection, for example, number one, establishing body position. Number two, protect the puck. I just got the puck. How do I keep it? Where do I put it so it's not exposed? Where do I put it so the other team can't get it? How do I extend possession? How do I get the puck? How do I protect it? And then how do I keep it so that I can keep possession either for myself or for my teammates? And what is the next play? Am I able to get a loose puck and protect it and then keep it so that we can make the next play either as an individual or as a team? The next step would be to be a threat. Am I a threat to shoot? Am I a threat to pass? So extending the possession and then being able to be a threat to do something with it. And then finally, obviously, is finish. So that's kind of a process or a chain of events, if you will, that we look at for puck protection. But we can, I think as a coach, you can come up with all kinds of little points to consider on any number of skills that will help, number one, help you in the development of that process, but also give the players something to think about as they go through the learning curve as well. So from a technique standpoint, again, it's not just about teaching the technique. It's not just about teaching the toe drag, but it's teaching it so you can get results. So that player has that tool to use that move in the split instance in a game when it's required. The repetition is what helps players become consistent performers. So whether you're doing the skill or the drill multiple times over multiple practices, or whatever your situation is, it's important to get repetition so the players can become consistent. And then when that happens is when you're going to start to see it being incorporated from a skill side into drills and ultimately into games. And to me, that's a huge component of developing hockey sense. The better the kids are at the fundamental skills, the less they have to think about that in a game situation. And they're actually able to process the situation from a read and react component. So again, when players don't have to worry about what they're doing with their feet, they don't have to worry about what they're doing when they're handling the puck, they're going to be able to look at more plays. They're going to look at extending possessions, and they're going to be able to become a threat. So it all comes back to the fundamental skills. Practicing, I think it's important to practice at a speed so players can learn. It's okay if a practice doesn't look good or a drill doesn't look good. We can't expect it to be done excellent right off the bat. But what you do want to see is progressions. And a lot of the stuff we see on social media now, it's really good players doing something really well. Well, guess what? They weren't like that when they started. They started basic, and they developed along the way to the point where they got to where they are. So don't be afraid if something doesn't look good. That doesn't necessarily mean it's failing. An example of a progression for puck handling could be, if you can't do it standing still, you can't do it moving, and you probably can't do it to beat an opponent. So we need to be able to handle the puck in a small area. You need to be able to handle the puck in a moving situation, and ultimately you're going to progress to beating an opponent. But those are important things to consider. And again, as I said earlier, is we don't need to do the same drills every single day. There's different drills that can work on the same skill. So keep that variety there to keep it fresh for players. And then ultimately, they need to learn at a speed where they can make mistakes and they can think, and they don't have to worry about making mistakes. A lot of times in games, that's what happens. Kids are worried about making mistakes because they might not see the ice again. And again, typically at higher levels for a lot of kids, that's kind of what it's like. It's get it in, get it out, and get off. And they're worried about making mistakes because they might not get on the power play. They might not see another shift. So as a coach, it's important to encourage them to make mistakes as long as they're learning from those mistakes and they're not repeating the same things over and over and over. The figure it out component to me is all about creativity and improvisation. It's, I think if players are worried about the outcome, they're worried about making mistakes, they're not necessarily going to reach their potential. So in a lot of cases, I really like setting up or creating the drill and let the players decide the pattern. You might have a couple of goals that you want to achieve in there, but who cares if they turn left or they turn right? In a game, you never know. It's so much based on the situation as to which way they turn or whether they shoot or whether they pass. So, set up the situations where kids can decide. You're going to see a better transfer into the game side. Practicing with purpose and speed, again, to me, it comes down to the repetition of the skill, so they can do it without having to think about it, and they're going to be able to add speed to it. There's going to be a purpose to what they're doing, so they can understand that. And to me, I think it's really, really important that the game-like application of drills is applied in practice. So I would always work on skills in the area of the ice where I think it's mostly going to happen in a game. So they have that type of ability to recall what they've done in practice and how that applies to a game situation. Ultimately, when we're doing that type of thing, it does get us to the point where, again, we're going to see that transfer. Purpose and speed, again, it's important to be looking at, sometimes you're going to handle the puck with fast hands, and sometimes you're going to underhandle the puck. Again, it all comes into different situations that happen in a game. When it comes to obstacles and things on the ice, I think they can be beneficial, but ultimately those aren't on the ice in the game. And we need to take the pylons, we need to take the stick shafts, we need to take any of the danglers and things away so that players are doing the move at the right time because it's the right read. And again, there's lots of different things that people use on the ice, and I think there's a benefit to them at some point. But if you want to practice with purpose and speed, I think ultimately you need to take those things away so that there's an opportunity for players to do those moves in a situation where they're either it's against a coach or another player. And then finally, I think you want to add stress. As much as possible, I tried to add stress or chasers to drills because that's what happens in a game. When you get the puck, someone's chasing you. They're trying to get it back. So the more you can do that in practice, number one, it's going to increase the speed. But number two, it also gives them that feeling of being able to do things under duress. And I think that's a huge component as well. And finally, the game application. I'd say kids today are a little bit different than they were even 10 years ago. Now they want to know, why are we doing this drill? How's it going to make me better? What's the benefit? And so again, I think to try and apply everything back to a game situation is going to be important for a coach to help get buy-in from the players. It's important to do drills that the kids like. It's important to do drills where the kids can see themselves getting better. Add the stress or the chaser, because that happens in every game. And then ultimately, I think you're going to see players buying into that stuff a little bit more.
I've been asked many times.
Here's a little video from the golf world about keeping it simple.
What are the secrets? What are the secrets of golf that pros know? Well, I heard this one time, and I remembered it. It's really, if you write this down, it really helps. What I try to do, I try to flat load my feet so I can snap load my power package. That way I can amplify both lag and drag pressure to impact pitch. As long as my number 2 power accumulator doesn't break down, I can reach maximum centrifugal force with minimum pivotal resistance. You see, the pivot is utilization of multiple centers to produce a circular motion, which generates centrifugal force on an adjusted plane, plus the main balance necessary for a two-line delivery path. The golf is geometrically oriented linear course. It involves a physical muscular thrust and geometry of the circle. You can divide the golf swing into 24 basic components, each having from 12 to 15 variations. Now, when you think of all this and you get it all set, hopefully you'll hit shots like this.
So hopefully the sound came through there, but I think it's a great video just on again, trying to illustrate the fact that we need to keep things simple. We can't overcomplicate it. We can't have 100 things in our head when we're going into the game. As a coach, it's our job to make sure that it's simple and that it's understandable, and then obviously that it's relatable and transferable to kids. So we kind of look at a chart. When I try to put together practice plans, I look at it, and obviously in the upper right-hand corner, we want to put together drills or skills that are high in repetition and simulate a game. That's our best case scenario. Worst case scenario is something that is low repetition, kids aren't moving, and it's non-game like. That's not fun, and you're not going to see any results from a development standpoint. So obviously we're going to have some times in drills when maybe something is game-like, but it's maybe not a lot of reps, or another one where it's high repetition, but maybe it's not game-like. But I think if you can try to develop a system where you have your drills or your practices or lots of repetition and game simulation, you're going to see that transfer into game play. I'm going to talk a little about a few different concepts here, and some of it may be old hat to some of you, and some of it may be new, but it's kind of a way that we look at developing players. So we look at a progression, which is basically the same drill. So the same setup, the players start in the same place, they're basically skating the same pattern. But we might start with just skating, then we might move to puck control, then we might add a pass, and we might add additional players, and then maybe we add stress or pressure. But essentially a progression is just that. It's the same drill, and we just add components. So if we look at the video clip here, a lot of times, this is just the 4-pylon agility. I'll tell players when we start, there's no pattern. I want to see fast hands. I want to see fast feet. If you fall down or lose the puck, good, that means you're trying. And then you can progress at the same pattern, but now we got 2 players. And, again, the amount of times that they're on their inside edge and outside edge with even knowing that they're getting better just by doing. And a lot of times I'll tell them, don't avoid the other player, go out and challenge them. So learn how to handle the puck in traffic and be creative. And from a coaching standpoint, this doesn't take a lot of technical knowledge. It's more encouraging. Then you can say you can add the pass. So you want to teach a concept like puck support. Where there's still skating skills, there's thinking skills, there's the ability to handle the puck with your eyes up, moving in a position where you can receive a pass, where you can make a pass, putting the puck in the right places. So again, from a progression standpoint, these are important concepts for coaches to be able to teach and to make sure that they're incorporating. But there's a lot of different things you can teach off this. With older players, again, you can almost emulate a power play setup where the puck's starting on the half wall. With younger players, again, it's a passing and receiving. You can progress it to a one-touch. So now they're not allowed to stick handle it after they receive the pass. And we see a lot of kids right now, tendency is to overhandle the puck. So again, you can incorporate a lot of different things into a drill like this to teach a lot of different things. And that drill can be used with 8-year-olds, and it can be used with NHL level players. The next progression on that would be, want to add it a little bit more game-like. So you can add a goalie in there for a shot, and you add the chaser. And this also gives you as a coach the opportunity to teach on both the offensive side of the game and the defensive side of the game. The lead player here can go around the pylons in any fashion or any order they want. The chaser has to follow. So again, teaching from the defensive side, you can really teach the kids the opportunity to how to use their stick, to get stick on puck, to take proper angles, different things like that, while the offensive person has to be fully aware of what they're doing, where they're going, how to protect the puck in certain situations. So this would be a progression on a drill, and that I think can start very, very basic with just skating with no puck, and progressing all of a sudden to something like this where it's game-like, and then you can see there's a pass added at the end. And a lot of the little skills, like this is a great drill just to evaluate creativity of your players. You don't have to give any instruction whatsoever. You just say, we're going to do 4-pylon agility. You got to pop, you got to chase him, you got to try and get it back. Without saying anything at all, you'll really get a good chance to evaluate where players are at from those different standpoints. So that's one of the things we kind of look at from a sample of a drill on a progression. When we look at a skill blend, To me, the difference is it's a series of skills needed to perform a play. So it's the skating skill required, it's the puck control skill required, it's the move, it's the shot. So it's not just the drill. It's what do you have to be able to do with your feet? What do you have to be able to do with the puck? What do you have to do from a deception standpoint? And what is the shot selection? So in a skill blend, it's really going beyond the progression side of a drill and looking at it might be multiple drills that you need in order to blend skills together. So if we look at an example, a lot of times if I want players to be able to work on being creative or deceptive upon entry, I look at it and say, what are the skating skills they need to have first? Well, they need to be able to incorporate inside edges. They need to be able to incorporate a crossover. It might be quickness. There's lots of different components to it, but to me, this is where the A before B, before C, before D comes in. If your players can't skate, they can't do the different skating skills we see here with quickness, it's going to be really hard for them to do this stuff with a puck on their stick. So a lot of times I'll start without a puck. And I'll say, today we're working on entries. And the first thing we do is we work on this. And the players will say, well, isn't an entry carrying the puck across the blue line? Yeah, but you need to have the different skating skills. And again, so this is a skill blend to me. There's all kinds of different skating skills that are involved here, but they're all going to have an effect on the player's ability to enter a zone or to enter across the blue line. So as we progress this along, we'll see now we add puck skills. So the exact same skating skill they use, now they have to be able to do it with the puck. But if they don't have to worry about what they're doing with their feet, it's going to be much easier for them to be able to do this with a puck. And again, you can add all kinds of different skills in here, from two-hand to one-hand, fast hand, slow hand, different things. Again, going from forehand to backhand. It's looking at the different skill blends that are required. So that's the skating skill. What's the puck skill? And don't be afraid just because you added a puck, that means you can't go back and do a skating skill. So we look in this one here, we got a fake shot, heel to heel, accelerate out. The first time you do that with a puck, it's probably going to be a disaster. But again, if you can do it and get them to figure out the pattern and what they have to do with their skates before you add the puck to it, you're going to start to see it translate. And now when they add the puck on their stick, they don't actually have to think about what they're doing. And then ultimately you want to get it into a drill situation. So how do we take those skating skills where it was, inside edge, there's the fakes. Now you have a net or an obstacle you have to be able to do it on. Again, they're not going to be necessarily thinking about what they're doing with their feet or the puck, but now they can actually just work on being creative in the drill. And these players in these videos here they're 10 and 11 years old. They're pretty good on their skates. They're pretty good. They're deceptive. And that's what we want to do. And again, just different drills you can do to add different skill blends into ultimately what you want to try and do, which is an entry and coming across the blue line with speed, being creative, and being able to do things like that. So that's kind of the process that we look at from a skill blend component. And then here's just a game clip. Again, we use these a lot of times to sell coaches on the why and the when. But if you can't skate, if you can't do that with a puck, it's going to be very, very difficult to be the player in a game. So again, I really urge everyone to look at the A, which is the skating, the B is the puck control, the C is the move, D is ultimately what you're going to do. So if you skip any of those steps, I think you're going to be less likely to be able to actually see those things happen in the game. When we look at a continuum, which is the next sort of component from a progression and a skill blend, it's not only the series of skills, but it's a series of tactics that are required. So it's a skill blend, it's skills and combinations, but what are the different components that you have to be able to not just do from a skill-wise, on a tactical-wise to make a play happen? So we might look at, a loose puck pickup. What are the things you have to be able to do? Is it position before possession? Where do I get my body so I can pick up the puck? What's the skating skill? How do I control the puck? What's the protection? Is there change of direction? Is there a tactic involved in why I would stop and go the other way? Different things like that. Or then do I drive a lane or do I take the puck to the middle? So the continuum component is actually adding in the skill blend and the skill components into a tactical side. So if we look at an example of this play, Crosby gets a loose puck, protects it, delay, eyes up, delay, finds a lane, and goes to the net to get a shot on net. So he doesn't start to play with the puck, but he gets a loose one. So again, if we were to look at this as a continuum, what are the different components in this whole sequence that have to happen in order for the play to happen? And there's lots of little things. You can see puck protect, puts it in the spot, comes to the middle, lifts the defender's stick so that he has the opportunity to get a backhand away. So I think in any sense of a gameplay, you could look at all kinds of different things, whether it's offensively or defensively, and say, what are the key points that made this play successful? And then it's the ability to break them down. So we started out, the very first part of that play was a loose puck. What's the skating skill you need? Do you have to have deception? Is it a head fake? Is it a shoulder check? Is it a stick fake? Are you going low? Are you going high? So a lot of times we'll just work something basic like this, but giving the kids the opportunity to just work on the technique of picking a loose puck up in the corner. And then obviously you'd get to a point where you're going to add pressure, where you're going to add stress, and you're going to focus on why it's important to look over your shoulder so you can understand, do I go left or do I go right? The second component might be the delay. So working on another drill or another station in practice where players are going to start with the puck in the corner and they're going to come up the wall, they're going to delay, and then they're going to attack the net. And again, we see here we have some obstacles. I think at some point it's important to take these away. And you have a coach who's adding pressure. And then ultimately, again, we see a double delay here, which is exactly mimicked what that play was in the game. So you can take a gameplay and break it down into the different components and develop each of those components. And all your players are going to be, some might be better at one, some might be better at the other. But when you break it down for them like that, it'll all start to piece together. Now we see the net drive. So how do I protect the puck? Am I on my forehand? Am I on my backhand? Again, we're using the obstacles as an opportunity, but if you get a coach or a player there, they're going to learn how do I lift the opposition stick so I can get an opportunity to take the puck to the net. Another continuum or chain of events type of thing, as we looked at previously with establishing body position, protecting the puck, extending the possession, and being a threat. So this is a scoring down low play. See the play develop as it rolls through here. We've got to pause in certain things. Number one, the player takes a look. They have an idea before they even get the puck of what they're going to do. So he understands, I'm going to get the loose puck. What do I do? A little fake, protect it, spin, extend possession, be a threat. So there's an example that we would use that 5-point list on. Establishing body position, taking a lane to the puck where I'm going to be able to do something with it once I get it. So what's my next play? Protect it, spin off. Understanding where am I going to go so I can extend my possession. Even if it's only for a second or two, you're extending your possession, which is opening up lanes for other teammates. Be a threat. Player probably could have drove the net from the short side if they wanted, but the threat was to find a teammate who was open, who ultimately gets a shot on net from the house. Okay, so again, when we look at the sequence here, at first glance, it might not look like a lot, but there's a lot of different things in there to consider. So again, when I talk to coaches, a lot of times I say use game clips as a way to help. I don't necessarily watch whether it's junior games or NHL games. I don't watch them necessarily for entertainment. I watch them for those types of things. I watch them for plays or things that happen that can make it even more easily understandable. From practicing, we'll use another example of scoring down low is net front. So again, almost the same type of thing. Establish body position, protect the puck, extend your possession, be a threat. The most important thing here is establishing body possession. So taking the lane away from the opposition. You don't necessarily have to be the fastest or the biggest or the strongest to get a puck. If you can get body position first, that's going to enable you to have success. So again, we're just going to show, again, some progressions along this. So puck protection, different drills you can utilize to work on puck protection. So again, there's a lot of different components here where you can work on really on players putting the puck in a position where it's beneficial. Once I get the puck, how do I extend the possession? What are the skills I have to do? What are the concepts? What are the tactics? What are, again, so I think if you start to look at games in these types of scenarios, and how do I take things that happen in a game and turn it into a situation where I can break it down or turn it into a practice. There's a lot of sort of the continuum skills, the skating skill, the puck skill, the fake, and ultimately the shot in the situation. So We really look at those as continuum. So we go from pressure or some progressions, and we get into skill blends. Then we look at the continuums. What are the listing of skills and tactics required? And then, go from there. So then here's just to sum that up. Here's the teaching continuum on puck protection. And I think you could do the same thing on puck retrievals. You could establish 3 points, 4 points, 5 points that you want to work with your defenseman on retrieving a puck. And it could be body position. It could be actually picking out the puck. Do I wheel? Is it a quick up? Is it a look off? Do I hinge? All kinds of different things that are important there to look at. But ultimately, you want to be able to get that puck out of your own zone as quickly and as easily as possible, whether it's skating it or whether it's passing it. So, again, try and think of your own ways to put these things together so that they make sense. A lot of you have probably seen this one. Crosby behind the net with Spezza chasing from a few years ago. If you were to look at just the number of different skills that happen in this play, there's a lot to teach. There's tight turns. You see he takes the bottom end off the stick, has to take the top end off the stick. There's a heel to heel, the mohawk, puck protection, puck in the skates, back up to the stick. Again, some heel to heel. There's a lot of different skills in order for that play to happen. It doesn't mean you have to just implement that entire sequence, but you could start very basic. So if we look at from a practice standpoint, I'll start basic with players and I'll just say, if I have a chance to show them that clip, I'll show them. It's just say, I just want to see creativity behind the net. Go left, go right, stop, do whatever you need to do. And look at what are they doing? Are they exposing the puck? Are they putting in a position where they can actually keep it, where they can extend possession? Then I'll add a coach to provide passive pressure, and then ultimately you get to a point where it's players and it's a live game situation where the defender's actually trying to take the puck, and if they get it, now they get out of the zone just like you would in a game. But to me, it's all those components along the way that you have to use to develop. And then finally, the chain of events is sort of the last one. And again, we looked at the whole series of skills and the order in which they're done in order for a play to happen. And so it's a little bit of a difference between a continuum where it's more along the lines of a single player. Chain of events is sort of the entire thing that happens in a game situation for a player to be able to make a play happen, or for a team to make things happen. So this is where you can incorporate more players or secondary players. So just a clip here of Bo Horvat with the Canucks receiving a pass, rushing down the ice, scores. Looks like a great play. But again, there's a lot of different things in this clip that really come into fruition. And again, if you were to look at this, you could create an entire practice over the sequences that happen in this one thing. So number one, the defenseman here. To me, the key, especially with young defensemen, that defenseman passed the puck when he should have, not when he needed to. A lot of young boys and girls as defensemen, they hang on to the puck so long, and then finally they decide to do something with it when they have no time because there's the opposition there. So working on whether it's a puck retrieval or making that good first pass, make that pass when you should, not when you have to. Second component, and I look over on the right-hand side is where Horvat, is the fact that when he skated, his pattern actually came into the middle of the ice. That held the forechecker to the middle longer. If he would have just skated up the wall and looked for the outlet pass, it would have allowed Nugent Hopkins here to just set the angle and probably cut him off at the blue line. But the fact that he skated into the middle, and then once he received the puck and skates away, it actually holds the forechecker to the middle lane a little bit longer. So again, in your drills, think about the pattern. Think about the skating pattern and what the result of that pattern would be on the opposition. So if we let this play a little further, gets the puck in motion, can skate away and creates time and space. You're going to see one crossover at the blue line here. Gets the defenseman to bite, again, creates more time, more space, builds a wall, takes the puck to the net. And so again, there's lots of little things in these plays that all have to happen. If any one of those links in that chain of events doesn't happen, the play doesn't work. Receive the puck in motion, create space, one crossover, fakes the D-man, creates more time and space for himself on the outside. A lot of players will just continue in a straight line, and I'll guarantee with two opposition members there's no way he's going to enter the zone with possession. He'll be forced to do it. So again, we might break that down with split our forwards in D. Puck retrieval. Stick fake, shoulder check, eyes up as you're coming out from behind the net. And again, there's lots of different things that you can work here. Again, you want to emphasize the shoulder check, the stick fake to go left or right, but that's going to be that first component of the chain of events. The defenseman has to be able to retrieve the puck and come out from behind the net with possession, eyes up, ready to make a play. Again, you might want to progress to actually making that outlet pass. You see right off the bat there that forward missed the pass. So that chain of events would be over. They'd have to start a new one because now you're going to have to retrieve a new puck. Here's a defenseman, bad pass. Okay, you're going to keep going at it. Obviously, that'd be a new chain of events. You had possession, you missed the pass, now it's a new one. The new chain of events is how do we recover a loose puck? It's okay when things don't happen. They're going to get better at it. Okay, fake, but no shoulder check. Okay? They stop behind the net, looks one way, passes the other. So there's all kinds of different things that you can add into these chain of events. And again, the guy's pretty good with his stick, but I would say that the shoulder check needs to be a lot better to understand where he's going. So again, on little plays like this, you can really evaluate defensemen as far as what are they doing well, what are they not doing well, how do we emphasize the things that we want to emphasize. And there we see a quick shoulder check, body fake, and wheel the net. Look one way, pass the other. So look-offs. Again, depending on the level of athlete you're working at, this is some of this stuff might be challenging, but for older players, at the end of the day, you want this to be second nature. They get a puck, shoulder check, fake, look to the right, pass to the left. Again, adding deception into these types of things. The last part coming out of the zone is being able to receive the puck. A lot of times I'll have players skate the pattern, but there's actually no puck, there's no pass involved. They're working on the skating pattern and getting the stick in position so they can actually receive it. Then you're going to get to the point where now they're actually going to receive the puck and receive it in motion so that their stick is at a proper place to receive the pass, they catch the puck and put it into position to be able to do something with it. So again, you can work on just this one component of it with a ton of passing and receiving to work on the proper technique to receive the puck. Once they get it, put it in a position so they can do something with it. Okay. We look at the move at the blue line. Sometimes you have to isolate that one crossover and then bringing the puck back to the outside. So you might want to do this maybe as something as part of the warm-up. There's the one crossover move, get the puck back outside. If you have to start basic, you have to start with just the skating component before you add a puck, no problem. But again, these are all elements that you look at in a chain of events, because if they don't make that move at the blue line, they may not beat the defenseman, and then again, you're starting from a different scenario. So, again, when I really look at this, I try to look at the components and how do we break it down? How do I isolate what to develop? How do I isolate the skating skill, the puck pass reception, the puck handling, different things like that, so that ultimately when they're actually finishing the drill, they can use that move of working with, again, that one crossover and getting the puck to the outside. How do we develop these types of things so that players can actually come across the blue line and they're not just static, they're not just going in a straight line where they have to make it a lot easier on the defender? How do we incorporate these things so that it's a challenge and they're dynamic all the time? The last part could be puck protection. So just working on something simple where players are going to drive wide around the coach, minimal resistance to start, place the puck under the stick, get a shot on net. If they haven't practiced this, it's going to be really hard to do that end move that Horvat did in the game to ultimately score. So again, to break down and isolate a lot of these things in the whole player development continuum is important. And then finally, we've got videos on this where we turn this into a full-on drill, where it starts with a defenseman on the puck retrieval, makes the pass when they should, follows the play up ice, all the different components. And I think you're more likely to see those things transfer to games when we get to that point. The last kind of thing that I want to touch on are a few components that we look at. If we want players to be deceptive on entries or moves, to me, the start of practice, the warm-up, where you can use obstacles on the ice here and just have the players getting repetition on all kinds of different moves. If you want to have them be able to be deceptive, to be able to beat players, whether it's on a rush or an open ice, I think the repetition of this type of stuff is really, really important. And again, you can have them do any number of different moves or sequences to work on so that they have this full repertoire of moves that they can do at any given moment. And the key to me of doing this a lot of times in warm up at the start of practice, the ice is fresh, the players are fresh, they're going to be in a creative mindset, but also if you're doing drills later in practice where you're going to use some of these moves, now they've actually done the move 10 or 15 or 20 times already. So what they're actually looking for in the drill is going to be that next level of deception or implementation based on the read or the read and react type of thing. So to me, it's really important to work on a lot of the stuff in warm-ups at the start of practice. So now they've done the skills multiple times, and by the time you come to do it in a drill or a game-like drill later on, they've already got the repetition to that. Puck protection is another one I look at. Again, starting simple and just working on getting used to handling the puck with pressure. Stationary, to me, puck protection is a big component of the game that's lacking, and I'll show you a little bit of some information on that at the end. Just a variety, getting players active. All three of them are busy. Then you can progress to actually protecting the puck by defending it against the opposition. We saw Crosby in that one play where he whacked the defender's stick first. Okay, then you can go to moving, but really working on all the components of puck protection and where to put the puck in a position so you can extend that possession. This is an important component too, I think, with teaching puck possession. A lot of players try to avoid the coach or the opposition, where I think they should go at him and again force that coach to hold their line. Adding puck protection to a situation where you started off stationary, so now it's moving, so the progression. Just getting kids comfortable in these situations where there's pressure in front, there's pressure in behind. That's what happens in a game. Those are really elements that are going to be coming into play. Loose pucks is a skill in itself. I don't think we practice it enough in practice, or I don't think we start drills often enough in practice where the players have to go get a puck. When I'm working with players now, very rarely do I start with players with the puck on their stick. They have to go get it. A lot of times I'll do it from a face-off alignment because that's what happens in a game. There's 30 or 40 face-offs in a game. And so instead of having the kids in the corner start with a puck and do their skill, I'll start them at a face-off, just like they're a left wing, a center, a defenseman. Throw the puck in different areas, and they got to react to it. And so again, starting drills with a loose puck, I think is going to have a big payoff when it comes to game-like transferability again, because they've worked on this. Even warm-up drills to start with skating or a puck, have them do something first, change directions, be deceptive. So adding all these types of things where you don't start with a puck, but you have to go get it. Relays and races, they'll learn very quickly, how do I get body position? How do I learn to compete for pucks in those situations? You've all done tons of things with relays and different components like that, but how do you incorporate this into practice so that you can have players working on the things that they want to work on? So to me, the dekes and deception, it's key to work on those things early in the practice. The puck protection skills, isolating those, and then getting to a point with loose puck retrieval. So now if you've worked on puck protection, it's working on loose puck retrievals. It's a skill in itself. And then one of the last ones that I think is a bit undercut is stealing the puck, playing defense, having a good stick. We all talk about stick on puck, body on body, but do we really spend the time in teaching players how to steal a puck? Michael Jordan for years and years in the NBA led the league in scoring, but he also led the league in steals. So stealing the puck, finding ways to get loose pucks back is going to put your team on offense. So again, I'd encourage, we start a lot of drills where, again, you have to steal a puck from somebody and then automatically turn and try and go back and score just like you would in a game. So again, we're looking at position before possession in some of these scenarios, lifting the stick, getting your body in a position so you can extend it. Simple, puck steal, transition, shot on net. Different components where you start out of the neutral zone where you're just going to steal a puck from a coach, and just like you do in a game, you're going to go back and get it. Steal the puck off the start of a drill in any different ways. Just add little challenges to players so they get a better understanding of how do I do this? If I'm on my left side, if I'm on my right side, if the opposition shoots left, if the opposition shoots right. Players will really figure this stuff out, but if we do it in practice, you're going to start to see a ton of this stuff happening in games. So it's a some things that we really think are important for coaches to add into their repertoire and how they start drills and different things like that. And ultimately, from a national standpoint, we look at a lot of these things at our high performance programs, where we look at under 17, under 18, under 20, and we basically work back and say, what are the skill deficiencies of players at our world junior team? And between our scouts and skills coaches and team coaches, we really looked at deficiencies at under 20 as defending off walls, transition skating in small areas, backhand pass reception, puck protection, making decisions with speed, and then consistent energy. So if we can take those things, then we can start working those things back into younger players when they're 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. They're not going to be deficiencies later on. Under 18, cutting the hands. So how do I skate into position to take the hands away from the opposition? Creating separation off the wall after there's been a puck battle. Transition skating, puck poise. So the ability to hang on to it and extend possession. Then under 17 is puck protection, creating space in tight areas, maintaining speed when you're shooting, receiving a pass, shooting deception, possession. So those are all, I know they're kind of broad topics, but when we look at that tells us that these are things we need to put more emphasis on in minor hockey to make sure that the coaches of young boys and young girls are putting the stuff into practice and incorporating it. So in essence, from a long-term player development standpoint, to summarize, we look at everything from the basics. What is the process? What does a season look like? Is it optimal for development? Once we've got to the point where we have opportunities to develop, are we doing the right things? Are we looking at breaking things down into, making sure we have the proper progressions from A before B, before C, before D? Are we looking at skill deficiencies? Are we actually spending enough time and isolating each of those components that we saw in the skill blends or the continuums or the chain of events to make sure that we're going to see results? And I think as you go through sort of the thought process, you're going to find your own methodology. You're going to find your own way to make sure that every practice is meaningful, every drill is meaningful, every week, every month is meaningful. And not necessarily feeling like you have to get all through this stuff in one season, because there's a lot to go through, but making sure that you're building on the progressions in that order. So that's kind of the I guess the presentation for tonight on what I had and what I wanted to share. For Brian, I'll make sure this presentation is available for you guys with all the video. You can pass it on, share it, do whatever you want with the delegates if there's anything. And then obviously have time to answer some questions for another, I think, 15 minutes or so here. So thanks a lot and I appreciate the time.
Great. Thanks so much, Corey. We have this recorded, so we'll post the recording. And once we get your presentation, we'll post that, and Jeff will send that link out as well. Apologies for the echo. Somebody told me on the chat at the beginning that the audio was echoing for me. I can even hear it, so I hope it's not too bad. Corey, we had one question come in. It was way back at the point where we were talking about warm-ups and active cool-downs. One of the coaches was interested, how can Hockey Canada help in having facilities allow a safe area at local arenas to do warm-ups and cool-downs? Many of the arenas we play and practice at won't allow these activities.
That's a great point. I've seen some of those rinks in Calgary, where there's a sign that says no stick handling in the hallway, no ball handling, no running, no jumping.
Yeah.
That's a component, and it's a huge difference in philosophy from what we see in Europe. Where they look at it as a recreational facility, as a place of activity. I think in some rinks, if you have the ability where there's a meeting room, or you have a place that's close by, where you can do something, if you're at the part of the season in the fall where maybe you can do some things outside. I've seen some rinks where they have a little area, and basically they've created a little set of a circuit where there might be 12 or 15 different stations, and each one might be doing stick ladder, one might be doing juggling, one might be tossing a medicine ball, to your partner, different things like that. We're actually working on developing a bunch of video right now for off ice where we can show coaches, here's a series of 6 different warm-ups of the combination of skills to do with a ball or a puck, and as well doing some without doing anything, where it's just movement patterns that could be done in a parking lot. Obviously, I know in the wintertime sometimes it's not conducive because it's the weather's bad or whatever, but understanding that the situation isn't ideal in a lot of cases, I would try and see if you can find a way to make it work, and try and look at all the obstacles and how can we remove as many obstacles as possible to do this stuff, because I think it's going to be a huge opportunity to develop athleticism and sort of that physical literacy within our players.
For sure. Another question came in. From an individual player development standpoint, and specifically for kids that are on the bubble, do you think it's better for them to play at the highest level, or more advantageous for them to be a stronger player at a lower level?
That's a great question. We get that question a lot. The first part I would say is situational. And when I say situational, I would say it depends on the age of the player. Players that are under 13 years old, I would say it would be advantageous for them to be the best player on a lower team versus the weakest player on a higher level team. And the rationale there is the strongest player on a lower level team is going to develop a ton of confidence. They're going to have more time in games, more time with the puck on their stick, different things like that. They're going to have more time to develop those read and react skills. And even though they might be getting more points, more goals, more assists, different things like that, I think there's going to be a bigger payoff in the long run. At the U13 or under level, if I see the player who's the weakest player on a higher level team, many times they are spending the entire season just trying to catch up or not get left behind. And so they start taking shortcuts. They don't have the development yet to be able to slow things down and do it right. They're just in that mindset where they're always trying to catch up or not get left behind. Now, having said that, in upper levels, maybe U16, U17, midget AAA, junior, I think there's a benefit of that bubble player to sometimes playing up because it's a higher pace in practice. It's a higher level of competition. They're a little bit more developed from the cognitive side to be able to understand and to really fight through some of those challenges. Now, again, I said at the start, it's situational. A lot of it comes down to whether it's the parents or the coach knowing that player. If the player is driven and they really think that they're going to benefit from being challenged every single day, then that comes into the equation. If they think that their player is going to shy away from playing at a higher level, then I think you need to take that into consideration. So I'm not sure, I know I didn't give you a clear answer, but that's sort of the division. There's 13 and under, I would say be a better player on a lesser team. Above that, I think you really want to take into consideration the benefits of playing and practicing with higher level players. So hopefully that helped a little bit.
Great. Yeah, great answer. Next question just came in. We always hear a lot of talk about analytics during games. Has Hockey Canada done any work on practice analytics? Looking at puck touches, shots, passes, amount of time at the board, etc.
That's a great question. I think you're absolutely right. There's a ton of analytics available from games, and I would say there's an overabundance of analytics that are available from games, especially at the higher levels. Analytics are important, but they're not the be-all, end-all, because sometimes they don't necessarily tell you the true story. To be honest, we've done a few different studies with analytics in practice. For example, we've looked at the amount of time that the average player has the puck on their stick in practice versus the amount of time that a player has their puck on the stick in games. Now, these are The age group that we utilized was the old Pee Wee age group, so the under 13. The amount of time we've looked at, the amount of time, the amount of passes that they receive, the amount of passes that they attempt to receive. We've looked at the number of shots that the average player gets in practice and it's in a game. The challenge is actually, to be honest, is to film enough practices of the same team to get a large enough sample size, I think, to be able to make those numbers viable to the public. I also think it's important to do enough of a cross section of different teams, different ages, to be able to look at overall practices and go from there. We have lots of recommendations for coaches about the amount of time they should spend at the board, the number of repetitions that a player should get. But, it's one of the things that we plan to do. And I can just say, we're not comfortable in the data that we have to throw it out there and say that it's sort of the be all end all. We've done tons of studies at the U7 and the U9 level, looking at puck touches, shots on net, different things like that. But at the older levels, we just don't have enough video footage and analytics from a practice to really do that. But it is something that is on the forefront to look at actually in this season, is to do it and find coaches that are actually willing to be filmed over a number of practices and then looking at the data. So, but that's a great question.
Good. Another question just came in. What is the timeline for the seasonal plan changes? Early season hockey school, playoff tournament, etc., to make it down to the associations?
So right now, the seasonal structure is in place at U7, U9, and U11. Those have been approved by the Hockey Canada Board of Directors, which is made up by the 13 provincial organizations. Obviously, this fall is a different situation because we don't know for sure when hockey is going to start under a normal circumstance, whether it starts in September, or whether it starts in October or November. But the philosophy of those pathways is in place right now. And I believe that in most areas of the country, the provincial organizations, the member branch, has done a good job of passing that information on to the minor hockey associations. Whether that has trickled down from a minor hockey association into the hands of all the coaches and the parents, I can't honestly speak to that from a national level. But those three age divisions are on par to have that put in place this season. Now, having said that, again, because of COVID-19, if the season doesn't start till October or doesn't start till November, there's some of these components may change, but I still think the ultimate philosophy of it, no matter when you start, can be applied. Just because maybe hockey doesn't start till October, that doesn't mean that your first ice session should be a tryout. You should still get kids a chance to be on the ice. And so there's a lot of moving parts here, and I know I apologize if I can't give you a more solid answer there, but those three divisions are in place, and the under 13, under 15, under 18, those are being looked at as well. And it's going to be a matter of the provincial organizations or the member branches getting together and making a decision on when the implementation is. Some might implement it sooner than others, but it all comes back to communication with the teams, the leagues, the associations, on how that's going to work and when's the best way to do it. I think overall, philosophically, the majority of people agree with that philosophy of trying to make the season more optimal for development. So I guess the best thing is talk to your local minor hockey association, or member, in your guys' case, Hockey Eastern Ontario, and get some information there specific to your community if it's available at this point.
Okay. Long term, though, Corey, the ultimate goal behind these changes is that at some point in the future, all levels will all start with this hockey school concept, then move into tryouts, and at the end of their season, all teams will play in a tournament-style playoff. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great.
I mean, it's ironic, and we never could have seen this coming, but that is the NHL season right now. teams are all in a situation where it's hockey school. They're getting back on the ice. They're skating. They're doing whatever they need to do to get ready. Then there's going to be a short exhibition season, a little point where they're going to have 1 or 2 extra games, and then boom, it's a playoff style for the cup this year. Now, again, it's not something that we obviously planned, but if you look at it from a player standpoint, one of the misconceptions is that it's where players are going to lose games. They're going to get the same number of games as in the most part for what they've had before. We're just readjusting the season to allow for a better development component. So more practice and development early on, more games competition towards the end of the season, giving more kids a chance to play to the end. And I think from a facility side, it's going to make things a little bit more efficient. You're not going to be wondering if there's teams going to be still playing in March or not, when they put the ice in, when they take the ice out. I think from a younger player standpoint, the fact that more players are playing longer into the season may eliminate some of the thought that players and parents have to get into 3 months of spring hockey, because if the kids are actually getting enough hockey where it carries them later into the season, they might be more likely to play other sports and develop those other athletic abilities. So overall, we want the entire system at some point, and I can't honestly say if it's 2 years from now, 3 years from now, 4 years from now, by the time it gets slowly implemented at the different levels, but it's to make sure that it's done in a way that's going to be feasible and ultimately get us to a point where we think we're in a really good situation from a seasonal structure to develop players and coaches for that matter.
Right. Great. Well, Corey, that's all the questions that we've had. Want to thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule. We know COVID has had an impact on you guys at Hockey Canada, like it has the rest of us, but we also know that you're still very, very busy. Myself and Jeff know that firsthand. Jeff, is there anything that you needed to add before we sign off?
Nope. Corey, great. Really appreciate you taking the time tonight. Our webinar next will be a good festival from the Erie Otters. It will be on our regular Wednesday. Registration's open. Right. Thanks again, Corey.
No problem. And Jeff and Brian, again, thanks for the invite. Appreciate it. Thanks to everybody who's taken the time to spend a Thursday evening talking hockey. Hopefully you got 1 or 2 things out of there. Again, we wanted to supply some ideas or concepts that hopefully you can incorporate into your own coaching style and your own coaching opportunities. Jeff and Brian, feel free to pass my email along if anyone has any additional specific questions. Be happy to answer them. Love talking hockey, and every time you get a chance to do one of these, you learn something and you get some great questions and things to think about. So appreciate it, and hope everyone enjoys the rest of your evening.
Thank you, Corey. We'll see everybody next week, and as always, stay safe and stay healthy. Good night, everybody.